Up to now, most of our lessons have touched on how we as women should relate to very imperfect men. There's so many stories in the Bible about men, heroic men, whom I'm so glad I'm not married to. Abraham used his wife as a golden ticket. Isaac did the same. Jacob had 4 women to choose from. David had wives lined up. Elkanah had 2 wives. Peter had a bad temper and flip-flopped all over the place. One man, though, has no blemishes on his dealings with men. The Bible actually calls him perfect. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that man was perfect and upright, and one that feared God and eschewed evil. And there were born unto him 7 sons and 3 daughters. His substance also was 7,000 sheep, and 3,000 camels, and 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 she-asses, and a very great household, so that this man was the greatest of all the men of the east. And his sons went and feasted in their houses, every one his day, and sent and called for their 3 sisters to eat and to drink with them. And it was so, when the days of their feasting were gone about, that Job sent and sanctified them, and rose up early in the morning, and offered burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, It may be that my sons have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. Thus did Job continually. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them. And the Lord said unto Satan, Whence comest thou? Then Satan answered the Lord, and said, From going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it. And the Lord said unto Satan, Hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and an upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil? Then Satan answered the Lord, and said, Did Job fear God for naught? Hast thou not made an hedge about him, and about his house, and about all that he hath on every side? Thou hast blessed the work of his hands, and his substance is increased in the land. But put forth thine hand now, and touch all that he hath, and he will curse thee to thy face. And the Lord said unto Satan, Behold, all that he hath is in thy power, only upon himself put not forth thine hand. So Satan went forth from the presence of the Lord. And there was a day when his sons and his daughters were eating and drinking wine in their eldest brother's house. And there came a messenger unto Job, and said, The oxen were plowing, and the asses feeding beside them, and the Sabaeans fell upon them, and took them away. Yea, they have slain the servants with the edge of the sword, and I only am escaped alone to tell thee. While he was yet speaking, there came also another, and said, The fire of God is fallen from heaven, and hath burned up the sheep and the servants, and consumed them, and I only am escaped alone to tell thee. While he was yet speaking, there came also another, and said, The Chaldeans made 3 bands, and fell upon the camels, and have carried them away. Yea, and slain the servants with the edge of the sword, and I only am escaped alone to tell thee. While he was yet speaking, there came also another, and said, Thy sons and thy daughters were eating and drinking wine in their eldest brother's house. And behold, there came a great wind from the wilderness, and smote the 4 corners of the house, and it fell upon the young men, and they are dead. And I only am escaped alone to tell thee. Then Job arose, and rent his mantle, and shaved his head, and fell down upon the ground, and worshipped, and said, Naked came I out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return thither. The Lord gave, and the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. In all this Job sinned not, nor charged God foolishly. Again there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them to present himself before the Lord. And the Lord said unto Satan, From whence comest thou? And Satan answered the Lord, and said, From going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it. And the Lord said unto Satan, Hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and an upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil? And still he holdeth fast his integrity, although thou movest me against him to destroy him without cause. And Satan answered the Lord, and said, Skin for skin, yea, all that a man hath will he give for his life. But put forth thine hand now, and touch his flesh, his bone and his flesh, and he will curse thee to thy face. And the Lord said unto Satan, Behold, he is in thine hand, but save his life. So went Satan forth from the presence of the Lord, and smote Job with sore boils from the sole of his foot into his crown. And he took him a potsherd to scrape himself withal, and he sat down among the ashes. Then said his wife unto him, Dost thou still retain thine integrity? Curse God and die. But he said unto her, Thou speakest as one of the foolish women speaketh. What? Shall we receive good at the hand of God, and shall we not receive evil? In all this did not Job sin with his lips. So let's look at this closer. The Bible says there was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that man was perfect and upright, and one that feared God and eschewed evil. He was perfect and upright. He believed in God's promises. He feared God. He eschewed or shunned evil. And there were born unto him 7 sons and 3 daughters. That's a huge blessing. 7 sons and 3 daughters. His substance also is 7,000 sheep and 3,000 camels and 500 yoke of oxen and 500 she-asses, and a very great household, so that this man was the greatest of all the men of the east. Not only did he have a big family, but he also had riches. He was the greatest of all the men of the east. Things were good. And his sons went and feasted in their houses, every one his day, and sent called for their 3 sisters to eat and to drink with them. Not only was he godly, a father of many, and rich, but his children got along. They were friends with one another. What better gift? And it was so, when the days of their feasting were gone about, that Job sent and sanctified them, and rose up early in the morning and offered burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, It may be that my sons have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. And Job was concerned about his children's relationships to God. He was afraid they may have cursed God in their hearts. As they enjoyed their feasts, what if they inwardly chafed against the virtue God requires and wished to be free of restraint? What if their feasting made them hungry to go beyond the limits of righteousness, and they silently spoke evil against God in their hearts? Job remembered the temptations of being young. He didn't just assume they'll make their own choices. He loved God, and a big part of his worship for God was to raise children who also loved God. So he rolled out of bed early in the morning to make sacrifices in case they'd sin and curse God in their hearts. It wasn't that his children were outwardly sinning. The fact that they called their sisters, apparently still unmarried, shows that these feasts were probably innocent. But Job didn't trust the fact that things were good on the outside. He knew how easy it is for the heart to stray from God when there are no problems, when everything is fun and games. Even if they weren't doing anything wrong, he couldn't stop thinking how easy it would be for one of them to curse God in their hearts for maybe not being allowed to gratify their senses even further. He offered up burnt offerings according to the number of them all. That convicts me. It takes time and thought to pray specifically for each child every day according to their own needs. Imagine getting up and offering a sacrifice for 10 children, catching 10 animals, sharpening the knives, cutting through hide and slitting 10 throats, building a fire, laying each sacrifice on the fire, waiting for 10 sacrifices to burn, and doing that continually. This wasn't a flippant, God bless my kids. This was bloodshed for his kids. He was serious. The Lamb of God hadn't come yet, and blood had to be shed. Job couldn't control the rest of the world, but he could pray for and intercede for his children. He could anticipate where they might fall. He feared God, and he had a horrible dread that they might curse God in the privacy of their hearts. Thus did Job continually. This was his regular practice. He was consumed with his fear of God, his worship of God, so consumed that he cared more about making sure those he loved were right with God than he even loved to sleep. That is so convicting for me. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them. And the Lord said unto Satan, Whence comest thou? Then Satan answered the Lord and said, From going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it. And the Lord said unto Satan, Hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and an upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil? Now here's an amazing thing. God pulls back the curtain and lets us see his dealings with his angels, even the evil one. As he demands account of the adversary, it's almost as if he's asking him for our benefit, since God already knows. As if so we can hear the answer. God asks Satan where he's come from. Satan answers him, From going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it. He asks him if while he's been roaming the earth, he's considered his servant Job. Have you noticed this perfect and upright man, one that fears God and eschews evil, or shuns evil? What a leading question. Yes, he's noticed Job. A great man, so blessed, so complete, so kind and generous, would have been a huge problem for the enemy of men's souls. Job was the greatest man of the East, and such a powerful force for good would have severely cramped the devil's designs. He's been trying to get at Job. God had watched as Satan had nosed all around Job's territory, sniffing like a weasel trying to find a way into the chicken house. There was no way. God knew, and Satan knew the answer, and Satan's whining about it. He's only blessed because you've protected him. If Job ever felt pain, he'd curse you to your face. And the Lord said unto Satan, Behold, all that he hath is in thy power. Only upon himself put not forth thine hand. So Satan went forth from the presence of the Lord. Suddenly he's got an opening through the hedge around Job. He floods into that property, eager to destroy Job's legacy that's made him so influential for good over the men of the East. Piece by piece, his massive estate crumbles. And there was a day when his sons and his daughters were eating and drinking wine in their eldest brother's house. And there came a messenger unto Job, and said, The oxen were plowing, and the asses feeding beside them, and the Sabaeans fell upon them, and took them away. Yea, they have slain the servants with the edge of the sword, and I only am escaped alone to tell thee. While he was yet speaking, there came also another, and said, The fire of God is fallen from heaven, and hath burned up the sheep and the servants, and consumed them, and I only am escaped alone to tell thee. While he was yet speaking, there came also another, and said, The Chaldeans made out 3 bands, and fell upon the camels, and have carried them away. Yea, and slain the servants with the edge of the sword, and I only am escaped alone to tell thee. While he was yet speaking, there came also another, and said, Thy sons and thy daughters were eating and drinking wine in their eldest brother's house, and behold, there came a great wind from the wilderness, and smote the 4 corners of the house, and it fell upon the young men, and they are dead, and I only am escaped alone to tell thee. I imagine the enemy panting, his eyes scanning the perimeter, making sure there's nothing of Job's left untouched. He holds his breath, eager to not miss the fruits of his labor as Job shakes his fist and curses God to his face. I imagine the maniacal grin as Job doubles over with a shudder absorbing the news. As Job rises up, the enemy leans forward to not miss a word. Then Job arose and rent his mantle and shaved his head and fell down upon the ground and worshipped and said, Naked came I out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return thither. The Lord gave, and the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. In all this Job sinned not, nor charged God foolishly. And the devil probably rages away, roaring, He always wins, he always wins. Again, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord. And Satan came also among them to present himself before the Lord. And the Lord said unto Satan, From whence comest thou? And Satan answered the Lord and said, From going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it. How powerful God is, to have Satan present himself before God, to give account of himself periodically. And how arrogant of Satan to argue with God. The Bible calls the devil the accuser of the brethren. I'm guessing that there were still some days when the sons of God, the angels made directly by God, came to present themselves before God, and Satan among them. Of course, I don't know that for sure, but I'm guessing that still happens today. And I bet his chief report is not all the evil things he's doing, but all the bad things we're doing. If those were the reports God usually got, accusations against Noah for getting drunk, accusations against Abraham for not taking better care of Sarah, accusations against Jacob for being conniving, I wonder if God was looking forward to hearing Satan stuttering about Job with nothing bad to say, so much that God brings it up. And the Lord said unto Satan, Hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and an upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil? And still he holdeth fast his integrity, although thou movest me against him to destroy him without cause. Accusers love finding dirt and exposing it. It takes the spotlight off of them. So I'm guessing that, again, that the devil was pretty uncomfortable, still not having something bad about Job to throw up as a shield before God's holiness. He's definitely considered him. There's nothing to accuse. He's unlike anyone on earth. He's perfect, complete, upright. He does what he should. He fears God. He shudders to displease God in any way. He eschews. He shuns evil. He doesn't entertain it for even a minute. And now, even in his misery, he worships God. And Satan answered the Lord and said, Skin for skin, yea, although man hath will he give for his life. But put forth thine hand now, and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will curse thee to thy face. And the Lord said unto Satan, Behold, he is in thine hand, but save his life. I wonder if Satan was really so confident, or if he just breathes out arguing for the sake of going against God. Regardless, he went out eager to do his worst to Job, fueled by itching ears, eager to hear Job curse God to his face. So Satan went forth from the presence of the Lord and smote Job with sore boils from the sole of his foot unto his crown. And he took him a potsherd to scrape himself withal, and he sat down among the ashes. What ashes? I don't know. The only fire mentioned is where the fire of God fell on the sheep and surrounding servants, and the fire from his sacrifices he'd offer for his children, because it had been one of the feasting days when his children had been killed. It could be that he was still in the place where he'd been offering burnt offerings for his children when all the news came. So Job took a piece of broken pottery and began scraping those boils and sat down in the ashes. And Satan leaned in to hear him curse God. And nothing than footsteps. The shadow falls on Job, his wife. Then said his wife unto him, Dost thou still retain thine integrity? Curse God and die. Curse God and die. It's the battle of the ages. The one time in all of human history we see God and Satan engaged in an argument over a human being. If Job curses God, Satan for the first time is told the truth. He wins. And Satan holds his breath and leans in. But he said unto her, Thou speakest as one of the foolish women speaketh. What? Shall we receive good at the hand of God, and shall we not receive evil? In all this did not Job sin with his lips. I cannot imagine being Job's wife. She's lost everything too. She was used to having people serve her. She had a perfect husband. She had wealth. She was the first lady of the women of the East, married to the greatest man. She had 10 children who loved each other. And now, all she has is a perfect husband, and she is not like him. Because the God said there is none like him in the earth. Not there is no man like him in the earth, but there is none like him in the earth. So that includes her. If anyone could have been like him, it would have been her. They were one flesh, but she was not like him. And when worse came to worse and her emotions rose like a tsunami, she became the mouthpiece of Satan himself. Of course, she knew it was wrong to curse God. She knew it would bring destruction. But in her pain, she did not care. She felt what she felt, and at the moment she welcomed more destruction. She couldn't see Job chapter 42, verse 12, where God was going to bless Job twice as much as before and double the number of children she'd mother. She would have 10 more children, apparently. 3 more daughters, and those daughters would be the fairest in the land. She couldn't see those things because at the moment, all she saw was her pain. Good sense didn't register. Job's wife had incredible wealth up to now. She probably had people who would sing for her if she wanted it. She could be entertained. She could send someone else to get her water for her. She didn't have to go get it. She had running water. I doubt she had to hand wash her clothes or hang them on a line to dry them. Her husband had provided her those things, and when her husband was gone, in the depths of her anguish, she no longer cared whether he lived or died. Her gaze was on the gifts, not on the giver, and thus she became Satan's loudspeaker. Just as I can be when I forget to care more about God's plan for my husband than I care for my own comfort. When I care more about the gifts God gives me than I care about God or my husband. God's plan is good. There is an enemy, so bad things happen, but God has a plan to turn it to good. If, like Job's wife, I find myself penniless and childless, will I wish for my husband to disappear so I can start over? Or will I look up and trust that the end of the story hasn't happened yet? Through these lessons, we've looked at what power a woman can wield simply through whether her good sense or her wild emotions run the show. When we're running on logic, we have power to hold on to hope. We know that it shall be well, no matter what our eyes tell us. We're not afraid to let ourselves be known and accountable to our authorities. We discover, even through our mistakes, that God has a plan and it is good. We just have to do the next thing and trust God's lead through those that He's led us to follow. We learn to run to God when we're overwhelmed rather than sink into ourselves and turn hard. When we're running on emotion, though, we're uncontrollable. No one can tell us what to do, not even those warning dings going off in our brain. We're on our way to becoming a relic of wasted womanhood that people use as a bad example. We're the type of women who good people learn to avoid, and we can even become the mouthpiece of Satan for our own destruction and the loss of God's incredible plan for our lives. Because if Job's wife got her way and Job died, she'd never enjoy twice as much. She would be the one left to answer to the 3 condemning friends. She'd wonder if her lack of godliness was why judgment had fallen. The trauma would be complete, and the devil would have won. All because she was satisfied being close to a godly person rather than being godly herself. All because she was satisfied with the gifts without ever learning to appreciate the giver. Each of us have to answer for ourselves. If thou be wise, the Bible says, thou shalt be wise for thyself, but if thou scornest, thou alone shalt bear it. While Job was crawling out of bed to pray for their kids, and his wife grunted because he almost shook her out of her dream, she was choosing not to be like him. When she shrugged off her own imperfection and shook her head at his perfection, she was choosing not to be like him. When she dismissed his desire to do things uprightly, to hold fast his integrity, to refuse to budge when tempted, she was choosing not to be like him. When she decided God wasn't worth fearing, that encouraging her husband to curse him was no big deal. She'd made her choice not to be like Job. When she didn't shun evil when it appealed to her, she chose not to be like him. And since she was not like Job, she lost the most important battle she'd ever face. And the same thing can happen to me in my evil day. And yet, we never hear that she died. We hear about friends coming to visit. We hear their detailed conversations. Later we hear about how Job's breath is strange to his wife. We hear Job imply that the worst thing that could happen would be for his wife to be unfaithful to him. But we never hear that she dies. You would think we would hear about that. And in the end, after Job prays for his friends, we hear the rest of the story. And the Lord turned the captivity of Job when he prayed for his friends. Also the Lord gave Job twice as much as he had before. Then came there unto him all his brethren and all his sisters, and all they that had been of his acquaintance before, and did eat bread with him in his house. And they bemoaned him and comforted him over all the evil that the Lord had brought upon him. Every man also gave him a piece of money, and every one an earring of gold. So the Lord blessed the latter end of Job more than his beginning, for he had 14,000 sheep, and 6,000 camels, and 1,000 yoke of oxen, and 1,000 she asses. He had also 7 sons and 3 daughters. And he called the name of the first Jemimah, and the name of the second Kezia, and the name of the third Karen-Happuch. And in all the land were no women found so fair as the daughters of Job, and their father gave them inheritance among their brethren. After this lived Job 140 years, and saw his sons and his sons' sons, even 4 generations. So Job died, being old and full of days. No, we don't hear another word about his wife. I imagine if she indeed did live, that she knew she was unworthy of a mention. She had encouraged Job to curse God and die. When he was at his lowest, she jumped on the devil's team and cheered against him. God didn't hide what she'd done for future generations. The rest of the world would hear of her mad ravings against the perfect man. God himself, from what I see, didn't record one good thing to make us like her. To the world, to angels, and maybe even to herself, she was reprehensible, but not to Job. What love he showed her. As she quavered with the intensity of her crazed counsel for Job to curse God and die, he answered her with such grace, such mildness. He said, "What? Not like you would say that, but what? That's not like you, dear. You're not yourself. What? Thou speakest as one of the foolish women speak it." He dismisses her evil words quickly, not holding her accountable for such foolish words. He acts surprised that she would ever act foolishly. That's love. That's the kind of love Jesus has for us. That's the hidden man of the heart. He sees us with such love that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. When we fail him, he covers us with his blood. We may have to bear some shame before men for our failures, but in his sight, we're accepted in the beloved. Just as Job was eager for his wife, even when she wasn't eager for him and his breath was strange to her. Job wouldn't live in this pain forever. When Job forgave and prayed for his friends, God restored to everything Job had times 2. So if this was the same wife, then she also got to enjoy double, and every bit of it she knew was not because of her. Job had 10 more children. That's double. And it makes me think the first 10 were believers because God doubled everything. He gave him 10 more, which means the first 10 weren't gone forever. God doubled his children. And I do know Job didn't birth those babies by himself. Maybe she wasn't worth mentioning, but Job loved her because, and only because of his love, she would get the chance to redo every regret she'd ever had as a mother. Every single one of us has been offered that love. Just as Job's wife had at some point, she had to admit her pride and sin and return to Job's arms. We must admit our pride and sin and return to Jesus, who's endured all the pain and offers us abundant life. See, it's all about Jesus. What a Savior. God, please bless the ladies that hear this and use this for your glory and draw us closer to yourself. Use it as you will. In Jesus' name, amen.